morning. Welcome to Politics is Power. Good morning. Welcome to Politics is Power. I'm your host, Rosa Garvin.
My name is Douglas Wilson, and today we're going to be talking about Amendment 1. Before we get into that, Politics is Power is a brand new show that we're bringing to you here, and the reason why we're here in this lovely backyard, is because we want to show you that politics is nothing but a kitchen table conversation that people have in their house and everyday lives. But today we're going to be talking about Amendment 1, and sitting beside me I have the lovely Ashley Blue, who is the Regional Field Director for the Coalition to Protect North Carolina Families. And for those of you who don't know, on May 8th on the ballot, there's going to be an amendment that has been being pushed by the Republican-controlled House and the Senate to say that marriage between a man and a woman is constitutional, and that's the only way to define marriage. So they have something called Amendment 1. But Ashley Blue today is going to tell us why we should vote against it. So Ashley, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
Hello,
how are you
Ashley.
guys?
That's good.
Good to see you.
So tell me, first tell me, what does the Coalition to Protect American Families do? What is that about?
Well, what we're doing here in North Carolina is we're trying to make sure that we educate people and encourage them to vote against Amendment 1 on May 8th. The exciting thing about our group, which is the Coalition to Protect North Carolina Families, is that we bring together different groups who are already organized in North Carolina and get them to join together in movement to try and go defeat this amendment. So there are many different groups that are a part of our coalition across the state.
Okay.
So why is it important to defeat this amendment?
Well, the things that we're trying to educate the Charlotte community about are the harms of the amendment, which is that it's going to affect families, specifically children, and it'll have also unintentional harms against victims of domestic abuse and seniors. And there's a lot of unforeseen things that we can expect coming out of the litigations from this amendment if it passes. So that's why we're working so hard to get people to vote against it.
Okay. And when it comes to the Amendment 1, is there something already in the state constitution that states that marriage is between a man and a woman, or basically does the Constitution already handle that? Or why is the Republicans trying to place an amendment that's not necessary?
Right. Well, the thing that's interesting about this amendment is that there is already a law in North Carolina that states that gay marriages are illegal in the state of North Carolina. So whether this bill passes or not, I should say this amendment passes or not, it's not going to change the fact that gays in this state cannot get married. You have to be a man and a woman entering into a marriage in the state of North Carolina. That's already a statute, so that's on the books already. The interesting thing about this amendment to our Constitution is that the state Constitution is supposed to guarantee rights. In our federal constitution, in our state constitution, and many state constitutions around the country, your constitution is meant to guarantee rights for people, to make sure that we continue on that path of life in the pursuit of happiness. And this is one of those instances where you can definitively point out that you're putting something into our Constitution that's not guaranteeing me a protection. It's not offering me anything to make sure that I'm a protected citizen, but you're taking something away. And we want to make sure that we don't let that happen here in the Tar Heel State.
Well, Ashley, let me ask you this question. How is it going to affect single parents? How is this amendment going to do that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of ways that it could potentially harm single mothers and women abroad. If you're in an unmarried relationship, you are basically going to be a victim of this amendment if it passes. The piece of legislation says that marriage between one man and one woman would be the only recognized domestic legal union in the state. So within that context, if you're not a married man or woman, any protections that you have right now are up in the air if this thing passes. So that's what we're trying to educate people on. One of the examples that we like to give are if you are a man and a woman who have had a child but you have not gotten married, which is there are thousands of families across the state of North Carolina that are in that position. It doesn't affect heterosexual, homosexual. If you're in an unmarried relationship a man and a woman who have had a child, and they are in agreement to put a child in a position where they can still receive health care from one of their parents, the state's not going to acknowledge that anymore because that family is not married. So any benefits that the child might have could possibly be revoked. When I'm educating people in the community about that, I like to say I'm so glad that President Obama has passed his health care bill federally that protects kids till they're 26, because I'm 24 and my parents were not married growing up. So I could have been a child that would be harmed by this bill if it was 10 years ago. So that's something that we want to educate people about, especially the Black community, because a lot of research has shown from various parties that outside of the LGBT community, which this piece of legislation directly targets, African American families will be the second largest block of people that will be harmed by the amendment.
And if you bring African Americans, I know that we see African Americans tend to be more conservative, and they may think this is just, and many people think it's just a gay issue.
Right.
What is your coalition doing to reach out to the Black community to get them more involved?
Everything, because it is my community and I live in Charlotte, so as the regional field director, that's the first thing you think about is, okay, how is this going to affect me, because I'm involved with this. That's only natural. So the things that we're doing here in Charlotte that are really exciting is, I said we're going to go to the African American bloc first. If you look at legislations that are similar to this that have passed in other states, one of the poster children states for this would be California. And one of the biggest mistakes that they made in their efforts to educate voters about the harms of Prop 8 was that they almost completely ignored the African American sector and churchgoers, which we're both of those. Traditionally, I'm in church every Sunday, so I could not disconnect myself from that fact. So what we did was we started calling out into the Betty's Ford corridor here in Charlotte. We went straight to District 2, where we've seen some things happening as far as people getting active and starting to pay attention to the politics going on in Mecklenburg County. In the I should say 4 years that I've been organizing politically in Mecklenburg County, you've seen a tide change and people are more aware. So there is an idea that African Americans are more conservative, but our research has shown once we call your everyday Black female church going out off of Betty's Ford Road, and we tell her about the amendment, she might not even know about the amendment, or she'll already be against it based off of biblical standards, which is completely okay. Your religious beliefs do not have to say that gay marriage is okay for you to vote against this amendment. You can be totally against gay marriage and still vote against this amendment. That's very clear. But once we educate people about the unexpected harms that will be on unmarried families who are not in a homosexual relationship, then they say, oh, okay, that logically that does not make sense. So we all are allowed to retain our religious beliefs. It's okay to believe that 2 women should not be in a relationship, 2 men should not be in a relationship. If that's your belief, fine. We're not asking you to change that. But what we are asking you to do is be aware of the fact that there are children who are going to be harmed by this on May 9th. So on May 8th, we got to make sure we do something against it.
Now, what about senior citizens? Is it going to affect them, and how is it going to affect them?
Yeah, well, that one's an interesting question. The things that we have started looking into, and we still don't even have a definitive answer on this yet, because the way that the amendment is worded, it's so broad. So there's a lot of different things that could happen. But what we've seen in cases in other states is that, a lot of times seniors who are in a state that is passing an amendment similar to this are forced to either get married or enter into a relationship to hold on to benefits that they've had. So, this could be a 70-year-old woman who is a widow, and she receives certain benefits now, where if this goes into effect, she may have to be forced to get married just to maintain, pensions and insurance and things like that. Which, that wording is very murky, like I said, because the amendment's so broad. So, I can't even give you a definitive example of it, but that's something that we can expect. So, those are things that we have a lot of lawyers looking into in a what-if scenario. And the scary thing about this amendment is, we can't even supply you definitive answers on how it's going to harm people right now. And it's still March. So let's not wait until May 9th to say, oh, by the way, we finally found out how it's going to affect seniors. Let's not do that. Let's just make sure we don't get this thing on the books, period.
Now, and I'm not sure if I'm correct in this, but I know that polling has shown that many North Carolinians are not in favor of this amendment being applied on the ballot. Why do you think the Republican-controlled House insists on pushing this when this is something that the people in this state really don't want to focus on? They want to focus on jobs and the economy.
That's an interesting point. I wish I had an answer for you. I would like for a Republican to answer that.
Yeah.
For us now, one of the things I like to tell people is that this amendment is a bipartisan effort with our coalition. So there are plenty of Republicans who are on our side, but the fact does remain that it was pushed through by a Republican General Assembly in North Carolina. Why they pushed it through, we can only guess. What I can tell you is that North Carolina is surrounded by a bunch of states who have already passed legislation similar to this. We are the only state. If you look at the map, every state that touches North Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Virginia, we're surrounded by hatred in those amendments. And it was very subtly applied to their constitutions, and we're like the one state that's holding out. So the example that I give people is, this to me just reminds me of the Civil War, where we were the last state to secede from the Union. And I just feel like North Carolina is a progressive state. North Carolinians feel like we're a progressive state, that we're doing things to stay above the tide when it comes to this economy. And the fact is that business owners are not going to want to bring new businesses to North Carolina with this amendment in effect, because they're going to have to rearrange some things. They're going to have to start discriminating potential hires, and they don't want to be put in that vulnerable position. So for North Carolina to stay on the upswing coming out of this recession, I should say, then we got to change some things. So that's the only suggestion that I could give.
So let me ask you a question. What compelled you to get involved with Amendment 1?
Oh, wow. Well, the honest truth is I came right off of organizing for Mayor Fox, and it was the most exciting thing to do. I've worked on the presidential campaigns, and that's fun because you see how federal things affect or apply to your state. But working on local campaigns is close to your heart. And so when I heard about this amendment and the things that could happen to unmarried families in this state, I had to jump on board. I'm a product of an unmarried family. That doesn't mean that I should be, treated any differently from anybody else. There are people who get in touch with us every day that say, what am I going to do if my child's health insurance is taken away on May 9th? There are people with children who get health care or who receive health benefits every day. You don't want to put a sick child in a vulnerable position, and that's all we want people to consider when they go to the ballots on May 8th.
And you mentioned organizing, and let's talk about President Obama for a little bit. I know that he came out against Amendment 1. I think it was in the New York Times and also in the Charlotte Observer, saying that he is against Amendment 1 in North Carolina. Has that given this campaign any boost? Has it helped out? Has it helped bring more awareness to it since the president came out against it?
Of course. President Obama making a stance on a local issue is something that you want and you're happy to see. The fact that his attention was drawn to North Carolina just points out how influential of a state we are and how important we are to the rest of the country. And the president had his eye on us and he wanted to speak out on this. Obviously it was a priority for him, but what we have seen is that people responded to that. People got that because people know President Obama and his stance on gay marriage, which is that he hasn't completely reconciled himself to the idea that that's okay. He hasn't completely resigned himself to, being on the side of gay marriage, but he is definitely not on the side of restricting people's benefits and putting people in vulnerable positions. So he's definitely in favor of restoring rights to people, and I think that made it okay for people. So when you have people like President Obama coming out on your side, of course that's awesome, and people are happy to hear that.
Well, my question to you is, we're going to be voting on May 8th. What do you need to tell our listeners what do they need to do once they get to the polls?
Okay, great. Well, when you get to the ballot on May 8th, one of the things we want to make sure is very clear that you're going to vote against this. Unmarried families should not be a target by any majority in our General Assembly. We don't want politics to start affecting our household. People are already having a difficult time sitting at the dinner table at night trying to make decisions on how they're going to keep the lights on. So let's not put them in a position to have to deal with more. Your plate's already full. So let's make sure that we vote against the amendment. Have those conversations with your friends, with your family, where you talk about the vulnerable positions that we'll be placing each other in. And let's just make sure that we keep up with the greatest commandment, which is to love thy neighbor, and make sure that we take care of them. And if we can do that and vote against this on May 8th, then North Carolina will continue to be the progressive blue state that we know and love.
Speaking of May 8th, is there a particular place on the ballot where this amendment is going to be, so we can tell our listeners where to look out for? I know most amendments is usually after you vote for the your gubernatorial candidates. Is it going to be?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm guessing that you're going to have to scroll down and get to the bottom of the ballot before it shows up. One of the things we just want to caution people about, if you do a straight ticket, either Democrat or Republican, that's not going to vote against the amendment. So you got to make sure, even if you hit a straight ticket, or if you go through and pick each and every candidate that you've decided to place your vote for, when you get down there, you're going to have to go and check for or against. And we want you to put a big X on that against, and then we'll be all squared away.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, everybody, you heard it. You have to vote against Amendment 1 on May 8th. And also remember that May 8th is primary day here in North Carolina. So make sure you take part in that and voting for the gubernatorial candidates as well as congressional and other local candidates as well.
My name is Sam Spencer, and I'm the president of the Young Democrats in North Carolina. I'm voting against the constitutional amendment on the ballot on May 8th. Actually, I've already voted against it because I got an absentee ballot, which I suggest anybody to do so you don't miss out your chance on voting against this thing. But I'm voting against it because I believe that all people are equal, and we need to have a country where the laws treat people equally. I'm happy to say that the Young Democrats in North Carolina was the first organization in the state to endorse a vote against the amendment. And we're asking people to vote against this. There are a lot of reasons that people have come up with, and there are a lot of harms that the amendment does. But at the end of the day, the most important reason to vote against the amendment is because it treats people unequally.
Please don't vote for Amendment 1, or actually the new name is the Constitutional Amendment, just recently changed by the State Board of Elections. Amendment 1, or the Constitutional Amendment, is really a generational issue, and all young people should not vote for it, because we all know somebody who is different. I mean, this does not just pertain to sexual orientation, but who's different, race, gender. It's any discriminatory bill. We're the only state in the South that has not put this discriminatory amendment into our Constitution yet, and it should be that way. For the past 100 years, our state has been a progressive state, and that's what we're known as. So there should be no reason why we should add something that's going to put us back to a time when we were discriminatory.
My name is Brian Holloway, and I am an advocate for having Amendment 1 done away with, because it is my strong belief that there are many different situations and many different causes that people just don't know about in everyday life. And there are some particular cases, like I have a friend whose mother was dying of breast cancer and whose father was pretty much absent, and he was adopted by his big brother from Big Brother Big Sister. But when it came down to health insurance, his big brother did not have health insurance, but his partner did. And he was not able to receive benefits because not only could he not be adopted jointly through partnership, but he could not receive medical benefits from a partner. So I'm an advocate for this being done away with. I'm an advocate for everyone to strongly look at Amendment 1 and how it directly involves domestic abuse and other issues, because this is not a gay issue. This is an issue for gender equality.
And it treats loving people unequally. It treats people who are no different from you and I unequally. And that's just wrong. And if there's one thing that the Young Democrats in North Carolina stands for, it is equality in government, equality in politics. And I implore anybody with a conscience to come out on May 8th or before and cast your vote against the constitutional amendment.
I've been a Republican all my life. I believe in the values that I was taught as a child and believe in the importance of individual liberty that I believe the Republican Party stands for. That's why this is such a troublesome amendment. We've got an effort by some of our legislative leaders to inject the law into an area of privacy where it need not go. And that's one of the reasons that as a Republican, I'm asking for other thoughtful voters to consider this amendment, to go beneath the surface and to examine it carefully.
I'm voting against Amendment 1 for a variety of reasons. One, it is unnecessary. We already have laws that say that a marriage is between one man and one woman. Secondly, it is job cutting. 80% of Fortune 500 companies in North Carolina already offer benefits for domestic partnerships. Allowing this amendment to pass will certainly curtail their ability to attract new businesses and new employees to this area. I also believe that it is exceptionally risky. We do not know what the unintended consequences will be to not only same-sex couples, but also to families across this state.
So when this Republican legislature passed the legislation to put on the ballot this amendment this coming May, that really hit me very hard as not just as a member of our community, but as a Republican. Historically, conservatives frowned upon government intervention in the lives of individuals. Conservatives supported personal responsibility, and they believed that the government should be a last resort. And what has happened now is that by having our legislature pass this amendment, you're actually taking government and forcing it to intrude on the lives of our citizens. And there is nothing conservative about having government interfere in someone's life. There is nothing conservative about the language in this amendment and the things that it is going to bring to bear if it passes. It is going to prohibit civil unions. It is going to take away domestic partner benefits that municipalities have already granted to their employees across North Carolina. There will be children in North Carolina who will lose their health care and their dental care when this passes. It's the responsibility of every one of us to make sure that our family, our friends, our neighbors, the people we go to church with, the people that we work with, the people who live on our street or in our building, all know the harmful effects that this amendment will have if it passes. And we need to encourage every single one of them to go out and to vote no.
Welcome back to Politics is Power. My name is Douglas Wilson, along here at Rosa Garvin, and today we have Ashley Blue. We're talking about Amendment 1, and Amendment 1 will be on the ballot on May 8th, and we're asking everybody to vote against Amendment 1. Ashley, during the break, you were telling us some more about what your organization is doing, and you mentioned something else to us that I would like for you to tell our viewers about.
A race to the ballot. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Exactly, yeah. Well, during the beginning stages of our campaign, starting back at the end of January, we had a kickoff to our campaign, which was called Race to the Ballot. And basically, our communications team with our communications director, Jen Jones, who is a lawyer in North Carolina. She's also written some cool things for the Huffington Post. And she basically ran from Cullowhee, North Carolina, up there in the mountains, and she ran all the way across the state to Wilmington. And that took her about a month and a half to do. And along the way, she stopped in different cities. She would go to college campuses, go to places of worship, churches and synagogues, and talk to people about the amendment and educate them on the harms that it had attached to it.
Okay.
So what are you doing in the? I'm sorry.
No.
What are you guys doing in the community here to make everyone aware?
Oh yeah, in the community here, what we do is we try and make sure that we go out to events and talk to people and educate them. We call out into the community every night and talk to different precincts across Mecklenburg County and educate them. But one of the more fun ways that we like to get involved is just going out, especially on the weekends, and going to places where families take their children and handing them information for them to meditate on in the days rolling up to the election.
So how successful has this been so far? Pretty good?
So far it's been amazing. It's been amazing. The support that we've gotten from Mecklenburg County is awesome. We've seen people from all different types of communities come in, people of faith. We've seen families and mothers bring their children and fathers bring their sons, and it's awesome just to see those different walks of life all in our campaign office trying to make sure that we vote against this thing. It's been awesome.
Okay. And overall with the campaign, I know you've been, you and I have spoken before. I know you've been working on this for a long time. Have you seen any progress made over the last couple of months all across the state, not just Mecklenburg, but are there other counties that are doing just as well as you see in Mecklenburg? Yeah,
we have 7 regional field offices. We've got offices in Winston-Salem, Greensboro, Raleigh, Orange County. And yeah, basically across the state, people that were firsthand when we called them, they weren't, and now they are against.
Good.
Well, Ashley, again, thank you for giving us all this wonderful information. And again, vote against Amendment 1.
Children are harmed by Amendment 1. Do you know how? Many will lose custody and visitation from parents who have been their parents all of their life. If Amendment 1 passes, can I get a big boo on that? Women are harmed by Amendment 1. Domestic violence protections are threatened. In Ohio, there were 27 cases where batterers were released from prison because they were able to use an amendment like the one we're going to face on May 8th as a defense against a conviction because they beat a girlfriend and not a wife. Can I get a big boo on that? So what are we going to do on May 8th? When are we going to do it? What are we going to do? When are we going to do it? Or we could go and vote early on April 19th.
Well, once again, my name is Douglas Wilson. Rosa Garvin. Ashley, thank you for being with us today.
Appreciate it.
And check out our website, www.politicsispower.com, where you can get all your latest local news, sports, and all the political news that we have in our state and in our country. And also check out our blog on that website, Politics is Power, the political report, which you will see a blog from me every day written on various issues that are going on in our community. Until then, thank you very much.
Politics is power.